Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Razan Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. US President first cancels, then talks of reinstating summit with Kim Jong-un. Trump says he is open to holding a summit with the North Korean leader on June 12th. Pyongyang ready to talk at any time with Trump. India's partnership with Russia, both special and privileged. Prime Minister Modi says at informal meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, interaction in Sochi focuses on improving bilateral ties and cooperation on local and international issues. International investigators reveal missile that downed a Malaysia Airlines flight over eastern Ukraine in 2014 belonged to a Russian brigade. Moscow denies any involvement in the incident. Malaysia says search for another flight, MH370, to end on May 29th. Human rights organization says Rohingya militants massacred Hindu villagers during 2017 uprising in Myanmar's Rakhine. The killings took place on the same day that the insurgents staged raids on police posts that tipped the state into crisis. US President Donald Trump said very productive talks have been held with North Korea on reinstating the summit with leader Kim Jong-un. In a tweet, Trump said that the meeting could still take place on the 12th of June in Singapore and if necessary will be extended beyond that date. He cancelled the summit on Thursday, blaming the North's open hostility. But North Korea later appeared conciliatory, saying it was willing to talk at any time in any form. Let us now look back at what led to Trump cancelling the summit in the first place and its immediate aftermath.
US President Donald Trump on Thursday called off a planned historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, even after North Korea followed through on a pledge to blow up tunnels at its nuclear test site. Referring to a scheduled June 12th meeting with Kim in Singapore, Trump said in a letter to the North Korean leader, "Sadly, based on the tremendous anger and open hostility displayed in your most recent statement, I feel it would be inappropriate at this time to have this long-planned meeting." Trump called it a missed opportunity and said he still hoped to meet Kim someday.
Based on the recent statement of North Korea, I have decided to terminate the planned summit in Singapore on June 12th. While many things can happen and a great opportunity lies ahead potentially, I believe that this is a tremendous setback for North Korea and indeed a setback for the world. I've spoken to General Mattis and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and our military, which is by far the most powerful anywhere in the world, that has been greatly enhanced recently, as you all know, is ready if necessary. Likewise, I have spoken to South Korea and Japan, and they are not only ready should foolish or reckless acts be taken by North Korea, but they are willing to shoulder much of the cost of any financial burden, any of the costs associated by the United States in operations if such an unfortunate situation is forced upon us. Hopefully, positive things will be taking place with respect to the future of North Korea.
World leaders regretted the cancellation of the summit between Washington, D.C. and Pyongyang. Speaking after talks with French President Emmanuel Macron in St. Petersburg, Russian President Putin said he hoped the summit would take place nonetheless.
Что касается отмены встречи на высшем уровне.
As for the cancellation of the summit between the leaders of North Korea and the US, Russia has received that piece of news with regret, because we were all expecting that will be a significant step forward to ease the tension in the Korean Peninsula, and that will be the beginning of the process of denuclearization of the whole Korean Peninsula.
Процесса денуклеаризации всего Корейского полуострова.
Macron echoed Putin's sentiment, adding that the process must continue in order to bring peace and security to the whole region.
The process, despite the evident difficulties, should advance, and we should not lose sight of the end goal, because it is required for peace and security for the whole region.
North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Kye-won on Friday said the North is open to resolving issues with the United States whenever and however after the summit was cancelled. The North's central news agency KCNA released a statement citing its first Vice Foreign Minister as saying the North had high regards for President Trump's efforts, which were unprecedented by any other US president, to create a historic North Korea-US summit. North Korea also confirmed the demolition of its nuclear test site at Pyongyang on Thursday, saying all its tunnels had been destroyed by explosions and their entrances completely closed.
Today's explosion proved very successful, and as you can see, the northern tunnel of the nuclear test ground was completely destructed, and all the entrances of the tunnel were completely blocked.
Meanwhile, anti-Trump rallies took place in Seoul on Friday, a day after US President Donald Trump cancelled the North Korea-US summit. Around 60 people from two different South Korean civic groups and an international women's organization gathered in front of the US embassy and chanted anti-Trump slogans, condemning the president and demanding he return to the dialogue table.
We've gathered here on the day after President Trump's announcement to unilaterally pull out of this June 12th summit, and we believe that it's important for Kim and Trump to pick up the phone and to get back to talks and to have a summit. And we believe that in the peace process that women must be included in the peace process, and that we want more people-to-people engagement, but we're not waiting for that to happen. We have announced that June 12th will be a global day of solidarity with the Korean people for peace.
Residents and commuters in Tokyo too expressed disappointment on the cancellation of the summit.
We have seen this situation easing for some time and some progress had been made. So I'm sorry to hear that progress has been halted by the cancellation of the talks.
I am surprised by the announcement because I thought it was proceeding smoothly and North Korea was even talking about abolishing their nuclear weapons. I don't know what exactly happened between them.
Japan has been keen on the progress of the Trump-Kim talks as it directly affects the country's security situation. North Korea's medium-range ballistic missiles put Japan within their boundaries. Japanese towns and villages, including capital Tokyo, have conducted a series of civilian missile evacuation drills and prepared underground shelters for any possible North Korean missile strikes. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And joining me on the program today to talk about this is Pramit Pal Chaudhary, foreign editor of Hindustan Times. Thank you for joining me on the program, Pramit. So what's happening with the Trump-Kim summit? Is it on or is it not?
I suspect there will be some kind of meeting. The problem is nobody knows when. Clearly, Kim and Trump, in their, as you mentioned, remarkably conciliatory statements at the end of all of this, both indicated that they still wanted to meet. The problem is that the agenda of that meeting remains up in the air, and the political timing that is suitable for both sides still remains uncertain. The fundamental problem with this kind of summitry is that you don't bother to build up towards it through the normal bureaucratic process. It's just two leaders effectively using Twitter to communicate with each other. This means that almost any small thing that affects the personal inclinations of either leader can lead to cancellation.
Right.
And this makes it extraordinarily difficult to predict what will happen, but also extremely easy to force the cancellation of the summit.
So what was it that irked Trump to go ahead and say that he wants to cancel the summit?
It's a good question, and we don't fully know because we don't have a clear idea what was going on in his mind. But it seems, and it's interesting, if you look at the letter and what he said afterwards, he indicates that China played a negative role in all of this. And the sense is, and this is a theory because we don't really know, both Kim and Trump are both extremely opaque individuals, is that initially there was no talk of what they would discuss. And it looked everything was moving into a sort of strange summit in which there would be no agenda. Informal summitry now seems to be in season. But then suddenly Kim says denuclearization is off the table. And there's some evidence that China was the one that came in and said, you need to make this very clear, because China ultimately was not very happy at the idea of a summit in which it had almost no role to play. And denuclearization would ultimately mean either unification of Korea or some sort of pacification that would reduce China's influence.
Right.
So if this theory is correct, he then announces denuclearization. We know we have a group of people in Trump's team, notably John Bolton, for whom denuclearization is the only agenda on this. So it is not inconceivable that they then went to Trump and said, if that's the agenda, you have to come out and say it has to be denuclearization. And then once you had this open conflict between the two, inevitably one or the other was going to pull out of the summit.
Sure.
And what we now know is that Trump decided Kim was going to pull out very soon, and he wanted to preempt him rather than face the humiliation of being the man who was being snubbed.
You know, were you surprised at all at Pyongyang's reaction to this, saying that they were open to a talk at any point in time?
I think there was surprise. and I think that's why they still feel they want, as I said, Kim definitely wants the summit to happen. I mean, he has nothing to lose. To have him, a leader of a pariah state, to be able to meet the president of the world's most powerful nation is still an enormous coup. So for him, he has nothing to lose on this. So I think he still hopes to do this. If nothing else, just the fact that he's held the summit, if nothing even happens, doesn't really matter.
But so it's a moral victory for him then, you think?
So no matter what, it's a win-win for him, no matter what happens as a consequence. But I think he was caught by surprise. He didn't seem to have expected Trump's. And this, again, comes to the issue of there's no back door, there's no real communication between the two sides. So he doesn't know. And you could see the South Koreans, who were acting as the messengers between these two countries, was completely, gobsmacked by what happened. There was this 11 near midnight meeting, emergency meeting of the National Security Council, where effectively President Moon said, what happened? I don't know why did this happen? So
they seem to have been taken by surprise the most. So if Kim and Trump do eventually meet, what do you think is going to be on the table? Is it going to be an informal summit, no agenda really?
I suspect it will have to be a meeting of just basically meeting of personalities, because I just don't see what can be on the agenda. I don't see denuclearization ever being, at best, it can be suggested, but nothing much more than that. But I think what we can expect if they do eventually meet is that, you forget, 3 or 4 months ago, everybody was talking about North Korea actually being, and America actually going to war. I mean, President Trump saying at the United Nations, I may have to destroy this country. That type of rhetoric we won't see anymore. And that would be at least some sort of an accomplishment in such a summit.
Okay, all right. We'll have to leave it at that then. Thank you so much, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. On that note, it's time for a short break now, but we'll be back with more international news on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. In a startling confirmation, Amnesty International reported that Rohingya militants had carried out mass massacres of Hindus in Myanmar. Amnesty said that the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, or ARSA, killed up to 99 Hindu women, men and children in at least 1 or 2 massacres. The perpetrated killings took place in 2 separate incidents on August 25, 2017, the same day that ARSA killed 12 members of Myanmar security forces in a coordinated attack on 30 police posts. An 18-year-old woman who survived the attack told Amnesty International that the attackers were armed with knives and iron rods and that her father, brother and uncle were all killed. Another woman said that she saw the militants slit the throats of women and children. 46 Hindus disappeared from a neighboring village the same day and are believed to have been killed by ARSA militants, bringing the combined death toll to 99. Amnesty International said that the slaughter of villagers underscores the fact that gross human rights violations are being perpetrated by both the Rohingya militants and the Myanmar government. Well, international investigators earlier this week said the missile that downed a Malaysia Airlines flight over eastern Ukraine in 2014 belonged to a Russian brigade. For the first time, the Dutch-led team said that the missile had come from a unit based in western Russia. Meanwhile, the search for another Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 will end next week after more than 4 years at a cost of tens of millions of dollars spent and with no clue of what happened to the ill-fated plane. Malaysia's cabinet agreed to a request by the US company operating the search, Ocean Infinity, to extend the hunt until May 29th. Here's a detailed report.
Prosecutors investigating the downing of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 over eastern Ukraine in 2014 said on Thursday they had identified the missile used to shoot down the plane as coming from a Russian military unit.
The joint investigative team concluded that the BUK missile transporter erector launcher and radar that was used to shoot down MH17 originated from the Russian armed forces.
The airliner was hit by a Russian-made missile on July 17, 2014, with 298 people on board, two-thirds of them Dutch, over territory held by pro-Russian separatists. All aboard died. Fred Westerbeek, chief prosecutor of the Dutch prosecutor's office, said the Russians had not previously reported the use of BUK missiles by the brigade in the area at the time of the shooting. Westerbeek called on witnesses, including members of the public, to help identify members of the crew that was operating the missile system. Russia has denied the involvement in the incident.
So far, the authorities of the Russian Federation did not report to the JIT that a BUK of the 53rd Brigade was used in eastern Ukraine and that this was used to shoot down flight MH17. On the 15th of October 2014, we already asked the Russian authorities to provide us with all the information that may be important for truth-finding based on Resolution 2166 of the UN Security Council. Because the JIT no longer wants to obtain information, exclusivity from the Russian authorities on this topic, we call today by the means of the media for the help of the public to answer questions about control and use of the BUK teller as well as about the missile that was launched with the teller.
Meanwhile, a private search by a US firm for Malaysian Airlines flight MH370, which also went missing in 2014 in one of the world's biggest aviation mysteries, will end on May 29.
We are committed to being transparent. That's the first principle, that the new government will be definitely very transparent in our investigation, and the full report will be given to the public. But of course, we have not determined when to release the report because there are some investigations still ongoing. As we said, we are committed to continue the search until 29th of May. So we will make a decision after 29th of May, depending on the results of the search.
Malaysia had agreed in January to pay Houston-based Ocean Infinity up to $70 million if it found the plane during a 90-day search in the southern Indian Ocean.
The principle of this search is no cure, no pay, which means if nothing is found by Ocean Infinity, the Malaysian government will not bear any cost. If the plane is found, an operation is needed to find the black box and the Malaysian government will pay $70 million.
Flight MH370 carrying 239 people disappeared en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing on March 8, 2014. Several efforts to trace the plane have been futile. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, another international news now. The US on Tuesday threatened Iran with the strongest sanctions in history if it does not give up its nuclear weapons program after Washington pulled out of the 2015 nuclear deal. The US also sought the support of countries like India to put pressure on Tehran. The US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo laid out 12 demands for Iran and said relief from sanctions would only come when Washington had seen tangible shifts in Iran's policies. In his first major foreign policy speech, Pompeo demanded major changes from Iran and said America will not allow the country to develop a nuclear weapon. Meanwhile, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani dismissed the US threat, saying that the rest of the world no longer accepts Washington making decisions on their behalf.
We will work to prevent and counteract any Iranian malign cyber activity. We will track down Iranian operatives and their Hezbollah proxies operating around the world, and we will crush them. Iran will never again have carte blanche to dominate the Middle East. And I would remind the leadership in Iran what President Trump said. If they restart their nuclear program, it will mean bigger problems than they'd ever had before.
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi returned to Delhi on Tuesday after concluding his visit to Russia, where he held a 9-hour informal meeting with President Vladimir Putin. Prime Minister Modi said that he had extremely productive discussions on a complete range of India-Russia relations as well as other global subjects. The meetings ranged from one-on-ones to delegation-level talks, from a ride on a yacht to a visit to an educational centre. Here's more.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi leaving for India late on Monday after what he described as extremely productive discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin. MEA spokesperson Ravish Kumar tweeted, "Farewell, my friend." In a special gesture symbolizing our friendship, Russian President Putin personally bid farewell to Prime Minister Modi at the airport at the conclusion of Prime Minister's short but successful visit to Russia. The two leaders earlier held a 9-hour informal summit in the Black Sea resort town of Sochi. After the talks, Prime Minister Modi recalled the historic relations between the two countries and added that there was a new dimension to strengthening ties between the two countries now.
लगातार हमारे बायलैटरल मीटिंग होती रहती है, लेकिन मैं राष्ट्रपति पुतिन का बहुत आभारी हूँ। उन्होंने एक इनफॉर्मल समिट के रूप में, इनफॉर्मल मीटिंग के रूप में मुझे निमंत्रित किया और इसलिए इतने लंबे कालखंड में एक नया आयाम हमारे संबंधों में जुड़ा।
Prime Minister Modi recalled that former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee gave a strategic impetus to the relationship between the two countries. He said both the countries successfully transited into a special privileged strategic partnership since then.
हम दोनों आज गर्व से कह सकते हैं कि अटल जी ने और आपने जो बीज बोया था स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप का, वो आज एक विशाल वटवृक्ष में है, यानी एक प्रकार से स्पेशल प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप में रूपांतरित हुआ है। ये अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ा अचीवमेंट है।
Russian President Vladimir Putin thanked Modi for accepting his invitation to come to Sochi and said that the visit would give fresh impetus to the bilateral ties. Mentioning that the trade between the two countries is increasing fast, he said both the countries are supporting one another on international fora.
The relationship between Russia and India needs no special introduction. It has very deep roots.
За последнее время нам удалось придать дополнительный импульс.
Of late, we have been able to provide it with an additional impetus.
Both the leaders deliberated in detail on the issues of mutual, regional and global importance. MEA spokesperson Ravish Kumar shared on Twitter the pictures of the two leaders meeting, saying that the relationship was characterized by deep trust, mutual respect and immense goodwill. MEA said that the two leaders agreed to institute a strategic economic dialogue between Niti Aayog of India and the Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation to identify greater synergy in trade and investment. The two leaders also reiterated the significance of long-standing partnership in the military, security and nuclear energy fields. Modi and Putin expressed concern over terrorism and radicalization and their determination to combat terrorism in all its forms.
Both countries agreed that as major countries they had responsibility for global peace and stability to be maintained, and both leaders agreed that this kind of format of an informal summit is a good additional level of exchanges between them. Prime Minister has of course invited President Putin to visit India in the second half of the year for the annual summit, and he looks forward to receiving President Putin in India.
After the talks, the two leaders visited the Moya Russia Ethos Center. Thereafter, PM Modi took a ride in a yacht along with President Putin. Thereafter, Modi and Putin visited the Serious Educational Center, where the Prime Minister interacted with exceptionally talented young people from all regions of Russia at a special monthly camp.
आप में से हिंदुस्तान जाने का मन करता है ऐसे कितने हैं?
Сколько человек из вас хотят поехать в Индию?
PM Modi tweeted the glimpses of his day-long visit to Russia. He wrote, "Extremely productive discussions with President Putin. We reviewed the complete range of India-Russia relations as well as other global subjects. Friendship between India and Russia has stood the test of time. Our ties will continue to scale newer heights in the coming years." Both the leaders will also meet at the SCO summit in China and the BRICS summit in South Africa, besides having a formal summit later this year. With Akhilesh Suman, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And finally, a French band, Douce, amazed Chinese spectators with a thrilling sky concert on slack lines across 1,400-meter-high cliffs on the Tianmen mountain in central China. 6 performers wearing safety belts went on stage where they played instruments while walking on tight ropes high in the air. In addition to playing music, they also showed off their slacklining skills by bouncing and even rolling on the tight ropes. I'm going to leave you with these visuals from China. Until next time, this is Frank Pereira signing off.